The silence in the deep space monitoring station was shattered at exactly 0347 hours, when the emergency klaxons began their bone-chilling wail. Captain Jake Mitchell had been sipping his third cup of coffee, scanning the routine data streams. From the outer rim, when the transmission burst through every speaker on the bridge, like a banshee's scream, you know that feeling when you're home alone at night and you hear something that just doesn't belong? That primal chill that shoots down your spine? That's exactly what hit Jake as the alien voice crackled through the static, speaking in harmonics so broken and terrified that the universal translator struggled to keep up. Help us, ... please. Anyone who can hear this transmission. The voice belonged to Ambassador Kira Vex of the Ethereal Collective, a species known throughout the galaxy for their calm, melodic communication. But this wasn't calm. This was raw, undiluted terror that made Jake's hand shake as he gripped his coffee mug. The Shadow Horde comes. Our worlds burn. 7 star systems have gone dark forever. Kira's voice cracked like glass under pressure. Our plasma shields are worthless against them. They adapt to everything we throw at them. Every weapon, every defense, every desperate strategy we've tried, they learn from it and become stronger. Jake felt his blood turn to ice water. Shadow Horde wasn't just some pirate fleet or territorial dispute. These were the monsters that parents across 17 different species used to frighten their children into good behavior. Ancient legends spoke of entire galaxies consumed by the Horde, leaving nothing but empty void where civilizations once thrived. But here's the thing about legends. Sometimes they wake up hungry. The transmission continued, and Jake could hear explosions in the background, the sound of a dying world, if anyone can hear this. We are the last survivors of our kind. Our beautiful crystal cities are melting. Our children. The signal cut to static for a heartbeat before returning. They're adapting faster than we can fight. Please, if there's anyone out there with the strength to stand against them. The message ended with a coordinate burst, followed by the most chilling sound Jake had ever heard. Silence. Not the peaceful quiet of space, but the absolute absence of life itself. Within minutes, that same desperate plea was racing across subspace networks to every major civilization in the galaxy. The response was swift and unanimous. Cold silence. The Crystalline Empire immediately sealed their borders. The Silicon Confederacy went into full lockdown mode. The aquatic leagues dove so deep into their ocean worlds that they might as well have disappeared. Smart move, really. When gods start bleeding, mortals should probably hide. But Earth was different. Admiral Tyler Brooks was in the middle of a strategic planning session when the transmission reached Sol System. The moment Kira's voice finished speaking, every human in that room felt something ancient and primal stir in their chest. Something that had been forged in the crucible of 10,000 years of warfare, shaped by ice ages and plagues, and the endless struggle to survive on a planet that seemed designed to kill everything that lived on it. Tyler Brooks was a man who had seen combat on 6 different worlds. He'd lost friends to alien diseases, watched good soldiers die in the vacuum of space, and carried scars from battles that would have broken lesser species. But as he listened to that desperate alien mother begging for help, something inside him snapped. The war table solid titanium and supposedly indestructible cracked under the force of his fist. The sound echoed through the command center like a gunshot, and every officer in the room felt their adrenaline spike. Get me the entire Pacific Fleet. Now. Tyler's voice carried the kind of authority that made admirals jump and captains scramble for their posts. Its eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to burn with its own light. And I mean everything. Every destroyer, every cruiser, every battle-hardened crew that's ever looked death in the eye and laughed. His aide, Commander Lisa Parker, stepped forward with the kind of calm efficiency that had made her invaluable in a dozen crisis situations. Sir, the other species are calling this a suicide mission. Our intelligence suggests the Shadow Horde has consumed 3 galaxies. No one has ever survived contact with them. Tyler turned to face her, and Lisa actually took a step back. She'd served with this man for 8 years, but she'd never seen him look like this. It wasn't just anger, it was something deeper, something that spoke to the very core of what it meant to be human. Commander Parker, do you know what separates us from every other species in this galaxy? His voice was quiet now, but somehow That made it more terrifying. Evolved on garden worlds. Paradise planets where the biggest threat was maybe a thunderstorm or a seasonal migration. Us, we crawled out of a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. He walked to the massive viewport overlooking Earth's orbital. Defense platforms, each one bristling with weapons that other species considered primitive but brutally effective. Ice ages that lasted 100,000 years. Supervolcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Plagues that killed 90% of our population. Predators with teeth longer than your arm. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. We turned every single threat into a tool. Every enemy into a lesson. The room was absolutely silent now. And Lisa realized that everyone was holding their breath. Tyler's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. The Shadow Horde thinks they're apex predators. They're about to learn what real predators look like. But here's the question that should terrify every thinking being in the galaxy. What happens when you take a species that evolved to survive anything the universe could throw at them? Give them starships and weapons that could crack planets, and then threaten something they've decided to protect? The Shadow Horde was about to find out. The twin sons of Ethereal Prime hadn't seen darkness in over 3,000 years. Now, massive bioships stretched across the sky like cancerous tumors, their living holes pulsing with veins of corrupted energy. The Shadow Horde had arrived, and with them came a darkness so complete that even the planet's crystalline cities began to dim and crack under the weight of pure malevolence. Ambassador Kira Vex stood in what remained of the High Council chamber, watching through shattered windows as her people's most sacred sites were consumed by creatures that defied every law of physics and biology. The bioships weren't just attacking, they were feeding. Each pulse of their alien hearts drew more. Life from the planet below, turning lush gardens into withered wastelands in minutes. But then something impossible happened. Something that made the very fabric of space-time shudder, like a guitar string struck by a hammer. You know that feeling you get right before a thunderstorm hits? When the air itself seems to hold its breath and every instinct you have screams? That something massive is coming? That's exactly what rippled through hyperspace as 300 human warships prepared to tear reality a new one. Admiral Riley Thompson stood on the command deck of the UES Vengeance, her hands gripping the tactical display as readouts showed her fleet moving through hyperspace, like bullets through tissue paper. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the kind of calm efficiency that only comes from knowing you're riding into hell with the best damn crew in the galaxy. These weren't the elegant, swan-like vessels that other species preferred. Human ships. Looked like what they were, brutal instruments of destruction designed by a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of controlled violence. Angular hulls bristling with weapons that fired solid metal at relativistic speeds. Armor. Plating that could shrug off nuclear explosions. And reactors that burned so hot they could melt through a planet's core. Lieutenant Connor Hayes, barely 25, but already a veteran of 6 different conflicts, looked up from his communication station with the kind of expression you'd wear if someone had just told you the Easter Bunny was real and armed with heavy artillery. "Ma'am, we're getting panic signals from every allied species in the sector," he reported, his voice carefully controlled. The Crystalline Empire just sealed their borders completely. The aquatic leagues have gone so deep underwater, they're practically hibernating. And the Silicon Confederacy is broadcasting warnings that we're about to start an interstellar war that could consume half the galaxy. Here's a fun fact about humans that other species keep forgetting. We're the only species in known space that actually gets more determined when someone tells us something is impossible. Riley's smile was sharp, enough to perform surgery. They've never seen humans fight for something we care about. Hayes, these other species, they've lived on paradise worlds for so long, they've forgotten what real survival looks like. They think war is some kind of gentleman's game with rules, and honor and tea breaks. She turned to face the main display, where tactical readouts showed the Shadow Horde's bioships swarming around Ethereal Prime, like antibodies attacking an infection. Each ship was the size of a small moon, their living hulls adapting and evolving in real time to counter whatever the Ethereals threw at them. "Signal all ships," Riley commanded, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made hardened veterans. Snap to attention. We're going in hot. Full weapons free, all safeties off, and I want every reactor pushed to maximum burn. These monsters picked the wrong species to mess with. The response came back immediately from 300 ship captains, their voices creating a chorus that would have made Viking berserkers weep with pride. Acknowledged, Admiral. Let's show these things what evolution really looks like. But here's where things get interesting. The Shadow Horde had consumed entire galaxies. They'd faced energy weapons that could boil oceans, psychic attacks that could shatter minds, and technology so advanced it bordered on magic. What they'd never encountered was a species that had learned to fight dirty in the cosmic equivalent of Detroit's back alleys. The hyperspace exit point lit up like a supernova as the human fleet tore through reality itself. One moment, empty. Space. The next 300 ships, materializing in perfect formation, weapons already charging and targeting systems, painting every bioship in sight with the electronic equivalent of a death sentence. The first thing the Shadow Horde noticed was that these new ships moved differently. Where other species' vessels danced through space like ballet dancers, human ships moved like sharks, efficient, predatory, and absolutely focused on one thing: ending threats permanently. The second thing they noticed was that human weapons didn't follow the usual rules. No elegant energy beams or exotic particle streams, just solid chunks of metal accelerated to 20% of light speed, followed by nuclear warheads, kinetic impactors, and chemical explosives that burned hot enough to make stars jealous. Captain Maria Santos, commanding the destroyer U.S. Fury, watched her tactical display light up like Christmas morning as her targeting systems acquired lock after lock. "Well, would you look at that?" she muttered to her weapons officer. "Christmas came early this year, and someone left us a whole fleet of piñatas." The weapons officer, a grizzled veteran named Bob Jensen, who'd been blowing things up for the better part of 30 years, grinned like a kid in a candy store. "Ma'am, requesting permission to introduce these ugly sons of bitches to some good old-fashioned human hospitality." "Permission granted, Bob. Show them why Earth is classified as a death world." But the real shock wasn't the weapons or the tactics, or even the sheer audacity of charging headfirst into a fight that every other species had declared unwinnable. The real shock was what happened when the first Shadow bioship tried to use its adaptive abilities against human firepower. The creature's living hull began to shift and change, trying to develop defenses against the incoming kinetic rounds. Its bioarmor hardened. Its surface became reflective. An exotic energy field sprang up around its massive form, and then the rounds hit. Turns out, there's not much you can adapt to when someone fires a chunk of depleted uranium at you at 60,000 miles per second. Physics is physics, and momentum is a cruel mistress who doesn't care about your evolutionary advantages. The bioship's scream of pain and confusion echoed across multiple dimensions as its perfectly adapted defenses proved completely useless. Against the universe's most basic force, things moving really fast in directions they weren't supposed to be moving. Admiral Thompson watched the tactical display as her fleet spread out in a formation that would have looked chaotic to other species, but made perfect sense to humans who'd learned warfare. In 3 dimensions, while everyone else was still figuring out which end of a sword to hold, all ships execute pattern Delta 7. I want overlapping fields of fire and no gaps in our coverage. Remember, people, we're not here to win pretty. We're here to make sure nothing with tentacles ever threatens our friends again.
Oh.
Shadow Horde was about to learn a hard lesson about the difference between being an apex predator and being human. But the question that should have been keeping every sentient being in the galaxy awake at night was this: if humans could do this to creatures that had consumed entire galaxies, what exactly had Earth been preparing them for all these millennia? The real war was just beginning. The Shadow Horde had spent millions of years perfecting their evolutionary supremacy. They were living weapons, bioships that could adapt to any threat in real time. Energy weapons. Their hulls developed perfect reflection matrices within seconds. Phase technology. They shifted their molecular structure to become untouchable. Psychic attacks. Their collective consciousness simply absorbed and redirected mental assaults back at their attackers. They were the ultimate predators. the apex. Evolution of warfare itself. They had consumed 3 galaxies and faced every conceivable weapon the universe could throw at them. But here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy keeps forgetting: we didn't evolve to fight fair. We evolved to win. Commander Mason Clark stood on the bridge of the destroyer US Fury, watching his tactical display light up like the 4th of July as his railguns opened fire. The first salvo of depleted uranium slugs, each one accelerated. 20% of light speed, punched through the nearest bioship's adaptive armor like it was made of wet cardboard. "Holy hell," whispered his weapons officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, as the creature's hull simply ... disappeared.
Sir, there.
Adaptive defenses aren't even registering our attacks. It's like they don't know what to defend against. Mason's grin was the kind that made enemy commanders wake up in cold sweats. That's because they're trying to adapt to energy signatures and exotic particles. What they can't adapt to is good old-fashioned kinetic energy.
I'll
Target their breeding. Clusters. Don't let a single one of these uglies escape to make more uglies. You see, the Shadow Horde had made one critical mistake. They'd become so sophisticated, so perfectly evolved to counter advanced civilizations. They'd forgotten about the simplest law in the universe. F equals m. Force equals mass times acceleration. And when you accelerate a chunk of metal to 60,000 miles per second, no amount of biological adaptation is going to save you from Newton's laws. The bioships writhed and screamed. As human weapons tore through their ranks, each railgun shot carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear bomb. There was absolutely nothing their evolutionary programming could do to stop it. They tried hardening their hulls, the rounds punched through anyway. They tried energy shields. Kinetic weapons don't care about energy fields. They tried phasing out of normal space-time turns. Out momentum follows you into other dimensions. Meanwhile, the ethereal defenders watched from their dying world in stunned amazement as human ships moved through the battlefield with deadly precision. Their own vessels danced through space like elegant swans, performing graceful maneuvers that were as beautiful as they were tactically sound. Human ships moved like something else entirely, like sharks, like wolves, like every nightmare predator that had ever stalked prey through Earth's killing fields for 4 billion years. Captain Jake Morrison of the cruiser U.S. Relentless demonstrated this perfectly when his ship executed what could only be described as a barrel roll while simultaneously firing every weapon he had at 3 different targets. The maneuver would have killed any other species from the GI forces alone, but his crew just grinned and asked if they could do it again. "You know what I love about fighting these bioships?" Jake called out over the fleet communication channel as his ship's missiles turned another shadow creature into cosmic debris. "They keep trying to outthink us.
Out!
But you can't outthink crazy. And brother, we are certifiably insane." But the real showstopper came when one of the larger shadow bioships, a creature the size of Manhattan with tentacles that could wrap around a space station, decided to try a different approach. Instead of trading shots at range, it moved in close and extended massive tendrils toward the human flagship U.S. Vengeance, attempting to envelop and crush the ship like a cosmic python. Captain Avery Rodriguez had been commanding starships for 15 years, and in that time she'd faced pirates, aliens, rogue AI, and her mother-in-law. But she'd never faced anything quite like this. The bioship's tendrils were each bigger than her entire vessel, pulsing with alien energies that made her hull sensors scream warnings. Most captains would have tried evasive maneuvers. Some might have fired everything they had and hoped for. The best, a few might have considered ramming the creature and taking it down with them. Avery Rodriguez did something that made every other species in the galaxy question whether humans were actually sane. She vented her ships. "Atmosphere. All hands, seal your suits and prepare for atmospheric ignition," she commanded over the com. "We're about to give this overgrown squid a lesson in basic chemistry." Her crew, veterans who'd served with her through a dozen impossible battles, didn't even question the order. They just sealed their environmental suits and waited to see what their captain had planned this time. The Vengeance's atmosphere vented into space in a controlled burst, creating a cloud of oxygen-rich gas around the ship just as the shadow tendril made contact. Then Avery did something that would go down in military history as either the most brilliant tactical decision ever made or the most spectacular case of temporary insanity. She ignited it. The ship's emergency thrusters fired into the gas cloud, turning the UES Vengeance into a massive flamethrower. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away as superheated plasma washed over the bioship's tentacles at temperatures that would make the surface of the sun jealous. The creature's scream of pain and confusion echoed across multiple dimensions. Sound so alien and terrifying that several nearby species would later require therapy just from hearing the recordings. The bioship recoiled like it had grabbed a live electrical wire, its tentacles smoking and sparking with residual energy. "Welcome to Earth tactics, you cosmic horror reject," Avery roared over the fleet communication channel as her ship's atmospheric recyclers kicked in and began refilling the bridge with breathable air. "We've been setting things on fire since we discovered how to rub 2 sticks together." The response from the human fleet was immediate and enthusiastic. Every ship captain started looking for creative ways to weaponize things that weren't supposed to be weapons. The EU's Defiant started using its garbage disposal system to fire compressed waste at enemy ships. The UES Intrepid began spinning like a top while firing in all directions, creating a literal cone of destruction. The UES Phoenix actually ejected its own escape pods and detonated them like proximity mines. But here's what really terrified the Shadow Horde. The humans weren't just winning, they were enjoying it. Captain Lisa Chen, of the destroyer, U.S. Thunderbolt was actually laughing as she used her ship's grappling cables to lasso a bioship and slingshot it into an asteroid field. "You know what, people?" she called out over the cum. "I haven't had this much fun since that bar fight on Titan." The Shadow Horde, creatures that had consumed entire galaxies without breaking a sweat, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that didn't just want to survive the encounter. These humans wanted to win so badly, they were willing to turn their own ships into improvised weapons. They were having the time of their lives doing it. For the first time in millions of years, the Shadow Horde felt something they had never experienced before: fear. Not the simple survival instinct they triggered in their prey, but the deep, primal terror that comes from realizing you're not the apex predator anymore. But the real question was this: if humans could do this to creatures that had conquered galaxies, what exactly were they going to do when they really got warmed up? The answer would make the universe tremble. The encrypted transmission from Earth Command arrived at exactly the moment when Admiral Tyler Brooks watched a shadow bioship the size of a city attempt to regenerate from what should have been a fatal railgun strike. Hull was literally growing back, adapting, learning from the damage. That's when the message appeared on his personal display, and Brooks felt his blood turn to liquid fire. "Show them why humans don't stay extinct." 6 words. That's all it took to unleash something that had been carefully contained within human military doctrine for over 2 centuries. Something so fundamentally terrifying that Earth Command only authorized its use when facing true extinctional threats. Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, surrounded by officers who had just watched their enemy casually shrugged off weapons that could crack planets. The Shadow Horde wasn't just adapting to human tactics. They were evolving in real time, becoming stronger with every exchange. Any other species would have begun calculating retreat vectors and drafting surrender terms. But humans? Humans had a different response to impossible odds. Brooks opened the fleet-wide communication channel. His voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of violent evolution. Every word seemed to resonate with something primal and dangerous. That lived in the genetic memory of every human who heard it. "All ships, you are authorized to execute Protocol Omega." The silence that followed was deafening. Protocol Omega wasn't just a military strategy. It was humanity's acknowledgement that sometimes survival requires becoming the monster everyone else fears. It's time to remind the universe what happens when you threaten our friends, you know? That moment in every action movie when the good guy finally stops playing by the rules and the soundtrack shifts to something darker. That's exactly what happened across 300 human warships as crews, who had spent their entire careers holding back, suddenly received permission to show the galaxy what their species was really capable of. The response was immediate and Absolutely terrifying. Captain Rebecca Foster of the UES Retribution looked at her tactical officer with the kind of smile that made hardened veterans check their life insurance policies. You heard the Admiral. All safety's off, all limiters removed, and I want every reactor pushed past redline. If we're going to die out here, let's make sure the universe remembers why you don't mess with Earth's children. Her crew moved with the kind of efficiency that only comes from training in environments that would kill other species outright. These weren't soldiers who had learned warfare in comfortable simulators. These were men and women who had practiced combat scenarios in crushing gravity that would liquefy alien bones, trained in radiation levels that would cook most life forms, and drilled emergency procedures in conditions that would drive other species insane from sheer terror. The first indication that something had fundamentally changed came when the UES Retribution did something that violated every known law of space combat. It accelerated directly toward the largest Shadow Hive ship while firing every weapon system simultaneously. Sir, called out Navigation Officer Michael Torres. We're on a collision course with that bioship. Impact in 47 seconds. Foster's response was calm as a lake and twice as deadly. I know exactly where we're going, Torres. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. And remember, people, were not trying to survive this. We're trying to make sure they don't. The Shadow Hive ship, a creature that had devoured solar systems, suddenly found itself facing something it had never encountered, a species that would rather die fighting than live in defeat. The bioship's adaptive consciousness tried to process what it was seeing, but there was no evolutionary response for an enemy that treated its own survival as an acceptable loss. The collision was visible from 3 star systems away. The UES Retribution, her hull glowing white-hot from weapons fire and atmospheric friction, punched through the Hive ship's adaptive armor like a spear through tissue paper. But here's the thing that made other species question whether humans were actually sane. The ship didn't stop firing during the collision. Every weapon, every missile, every piece of explosive ordnance detonated. Simultaneously, as the Retribution's reactor went critical, the explosion created a new star for approximately for seconds. But that was just the opening act. Across the battlefield, human crews who had been carefully restraining themselves for the sake of galactic diplomacy suddenly received permission to fight the way their ancestors had fought saber-toothed tigers and ice ages in each other for millions of years. The UES Vengeance used its gravitational manipulation systems not to create defensive fields, but to literally grab a shadow bioship and use it as a club against 3 of its neighbors. Captain Angela Martinez's voice could be heard over the comm channels. Anybody else want to play catch? The destroyer US Phoenix didn't just fire its missiles, it fired its entire missile bay, then used the empty compartment as a launch tube for armored boarding parties. Marines in powered armor that weighed 3 tons each stormed bioships carrying weapons that any civilized species would consider barbarically primitive. Rifles that fired solid metal bullets, explosives that used chemical reactions instead of exotic particles, close combat weapons that were literally sharpened pieces of metal. Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson, leading Bravo Squad through the intestinal corridors of a shadow bioship, summed up human military philosophy perfectly as he used a combat knife to carve through what appeared to be a nerve cluster. You know what the problem with these bioships is? They're alive, and anything that's alive can be killed. His squad moved through the creature's living corridors like antibodies in reverse, each Marine carrying enough firepower to level a city block and the training to use it all in close quarters. The bioship's immune systems tried to respond, creating antibody creatures to fight the invaders. But they'd never faced anything like human Marines, who had trained for combat in crushing gravity and toxic atmospheres. Marine Corporal Lisa Wong actually laughed as she punched through a bioship's defensive membrane with her powered fist. Hey Sarge, these things remind me of that seafood restaurant back on Luna. Think they taste as good as they smell? But the real terror for the Shadow Horde came when they realized that humans weren't just using advanced technology to fight them, they were using everything. The UES Thunderbolt launched its garbage at enemy ships using magnetic accelerators. The UES Defiant actually vented its sewage system and ignited it as an improvised chemical weapon. The UES Intrepid started playing, Earth's music at volumes that weaponized sound itself. Fear turned to panic among the Shadow Horde as they realized they faced something that had never existed in their millions of years of galactic conquest. A species that had evolved specifically to kill. Not to hunt for food, not to defend territory, but to end threats so completely that they would never return. The Horde's collective consciousness, a mind that had consumed the thoughts of entire civilizations, suddenly encountered something it couldn't understand or predict. These humans didn't fight for survival or territory or resources. They fought because something they cared about had been threatened, and they were willing to turn themselves into living weapons to protect it. For the first time in cosmic history, the Shadow Horde felt genuine terror. Not the simple fear response they triggered in their prey, but the deep, existential dread that comes from realizing you're not the apex predator anymore. You're not even in the same evolutionary category. But as the human fleet carved through the Horde's formations like hot knives through butter, the real question hanging in the void was this: if this was what humans looked like when they were trying to save someone else, what would they look like when they were fighting for their own survival? The Shadow Horde was about to find out, and the universe would never be the same. The final Shadow bioship died on a Tuesday, after 3 days of relentless combat that had turned the ethereal star system into a cosmic graveyard. The last surviving creature of the Horde found itself facing something it had never encountered. In millions of years of galactic conquest, a human marine named Corporal Danny Rodriguez, who was having a very bad day and a really good weapon supply. The bioship, massive as a space station and adaptive as evolution itself, had survived the destruction of its entire fleet by burrowing into an asteroid field and trying to rebuild its strength. Its living hull pulsed with regenerative energy as it prepared for one final, desperate assault. This creature had consumed planets, devoured civilizations, and adapted to every weapon the galaxy had ever produced. It lasted exactly 47 seconds against humanity's simple philosophy: if it doesn't die the first time, use bigger guns. Corporal Rodriguez, floating in powered armor among the asteroid debris, looked at the bioship through his targeting scope and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of calling for backup or requesting orders, he did what humans had been doing for 10,000 years when faced with things that needed to be dead. He improvised. Using his suit's thrusters, Rodriguez maneuvered behind the largest asteroid in the field and began setting charges. Not the sophisticated plasma explosives other species preferred, but good old-fashioned chemical compounds that burned hot and loud and didn't care about adaptive defenses. When the asteroid exploded, it created a shotgun blast of rock moving at orbital velocity. The bioship's adaptive hull tried desperately to counter the incoming debris, hardening itself against kinetic impact, shifting its molecular structure, even attempting to phase out of normal spacetime. But there's no evolutionary response to half a mountain moving at you at 30,000 miles per hour. The creature's death scream was heard across 17 different dimensions. Admiral Riley Thompson stood in the crystal spire that served as the ethereal capital's diplomatic center, looking out over a world that had been dying 3 days ago and was now slowly coming back to life. The twin suns were visible again, their light no longer blocked by the massive shadows of bioships. In the distance, she could see human patrol vessels maintaining orbit, their angular hulls a stark contrast to the elegant architecture of ethereal civilization. Surrounding her were representatives from across the galaxy, beings who had watched the battle unfold with a mixture of awe, terror, and growing understanding that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Ambassador Kira Vex of the Ethereal Collective shimmered before Thompson, her crystalline form reflecting light in patterns that indicated deep respect mixed with something that looked suspiciously like fear. Admiral Thompson, Kira's voice chimed. Like wind through crystal formations, we have spent the last 3 days studying your species' historical data. We needed to understand what we had witnessed. Her form pulsed with uncertainty. Your world classification as Deathworld was insufficient, grossly insufficient. Thompson raised an eyebrow. the kind of expression that had made countless junior officers check their paperwork twice. How so? Species evolved to fill ecological niches? Predator, prey, symbiont, parasite, but humans, ... Kira's voice carried a note of something approaching wonder. You didn't evolve to build civilization. You evolved to survive apocalypse after apocalypse. Ice ages that lasted 100,000 years. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out your sun. Plagues that killed 90% of your population. It's asteroid impacts that would have sterilized any other world. Here's a fun fact that most species try not to think about. Earth has experienced 5 major extinction events, and humans are the descendants of the creatures that looked at planetary annihilation and said, "Hold my beer, I got this." Thompson nodded grimly. Earth taught us that everything wants to kill you. The asteroid that got the dinosaurs. Tuesday morning for us, supervolcanic eruptions. We invented agriculture to survive them. Global plagues. We built hospitals. Universe just gave us bigger targets to practice on. She gestured toward the viewport, where human ships patrolled the system's edge, their sensors scanning for any sign of returning threats. Each vessel bristled with weapons that other species considered barbarically primitive, but devastatingly effective.
Okay.
The Shadow Horde won't return.
I didn't either will anything else that threatens our allies.
But here's what really terrified the assembled. Alien dignitaries. Thompson said that last part, with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather. To her, protecting an entire star system from cosmic-level threats was just Tuesday. Representative Zex of the Silicon Confederacy, a crystalline being who communicated through harmonic frequencies, posed the question that every species was thinking. Admiral, your species has just demonstrated the ability to defeat creatures that consumed 3 galaxies. What are your intentions toward the rest of us? Thompson's smile was warm, genuine, and somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. We're going to do exactly what we just did. Someone calls for help. We show up. Someone threatens our friends. We introduce them to kinetic energy. Someone tries to hurt innocent people. She shrugged. Well, you saw what happened to the Shadow Horde. As news of the battle spread through galactic communication networks, a new understanding began to emerge across hundreds of civilizations. The reports were consistent and equally disturbing. Humans weren't just another species seeking to join galactic civilization. They were something fundamentally different. The aquatic. League's military analysts concluded that humans were even answer to extinction events. The Crystalline Empire's xenobiologists determined that humanity represented apex adaptation to hostile environments. The Silicon Confederacy's computers simply printed out a single word when asked to classify human military capability: terrifying. But the real shift in galactic consciousness came when someone asked the right question. If humans could do this to save strangers, what would they do to protect their own families? Captain Sarah Mitchell of the UES Defiant, monitoring communications. Traffic from her patrol route couldn't help but laugh at the intercepted alien military reports. You know what's funny? She called out to her bridge crew. They're all trying to figure out if we're dangerous. Meanwhile, we're just doing what humans have always done, looking out for our neighbors. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant James Parker, looked up from his displays with the kind of grin that had made his high school football coach proud. Ma'am, should we tell them that we were actually holding back during the fight? I mean, we didn't want to scare anybody. The bridge crew erupted in laughter that could be heard 3 decks away. But across the galaxy, in the deep bunkers and hidden facilities where military planners tried to sleep at night, single question kept everyone awake. If humans had just casually defeated the most feared force in cosmic history while holding back, what did their full military capability actually look like? The answer was classified under Earth Command's highest security protocols, but the rumors were enough to make entire star systems reconsider their foreign policy. Whispers spoke of weapons that could crack planets, ships that could survive supernovas, and Marines who trained for combat in the hearts of active volcanoes. The galaxy's apex predators had announced their arrival. They came bearing friendship, protection, and enough firepower to make gods nervous. The universe would never be the same, and for the first time in cosmic history, That was probably a good thing, because when the next cosmic horror emerged from the dark between stars, it would find itself facing something it had never encountered before, a species that had spent 4 billion years learning how to turn extinction events into learning experiences. And humans were very, very good students. The end.